Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 25th part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 25, UA Sports Festival. Izumi smiled as she laid back on the cloud, looking up at the sky above her. It was peaceful here, just laying back on a cloud watching the sky above her slowly drift past. Izumi, a young voice said beside her. Izumi turned her head to the side. Beside her lay a young girl with bluish, off-white hair, red eyes, and a small horn poking out of the right side of her forehead. She was wearing a white dress, and had a single angel wing on her back, with a small stump where the other one should have been. Yes, Izumi replied with a smile, patting the young angel on her head. Do you think we'll ever get a chance to fly? The young angel asked. Now that was a good question. The young angel's cut-off wing will heal, in time, allowing her to take flight. But Izumi, well, that's a different story. She was not an angel, just a normal human, with a fear of heights. Flying like the others was out of the question. Even the idea of being carried by one of them frightened her. But, like all problems, she would strive to overcome them. I'm sure we'll be flying soon, Izumi said with a smile. The young angel smiled back, but she could tell that it was another one of her fake smiles. A smile she used to cover up the pain she went through and keep the demon that tormented her at bay. But, one of these days, she will smile genuinely. The sudden flapping of wings brought their attention to the skies above. Izumi sat up as she looked to the heavens, and watched as four angels descended from above. The first was a woman with green hair and black eye, with 4 arms instead of 2. She didn't know her name, but she dubbed her the Frog Angel, due to having frog-like characteristics. The second angel was a tall woman with long black hair tied into a ponytail. She was dubbed the Creative Angel, due to being able to create anything she wanted to. The third angel was a recent addition to their group, a girl with long periwinkle hair that reached down to her legs, and wide blue eyes. There were also spirals of yellow energy coming out of her hands and feet as she descended. Because of this, she was the Spiral Angel. The 3 angels all had a single pair of large, angelic wings. They were all wearing white dresses that were rather flattering and revealing. And then there was the 6-winged Grand Angel herself, the one who had brought her here and comforted her when she was at her most vulnerable. She was far different from the others, possessing an almost alien, unearthly beauty. It was a beautiful sight, watching the 4 angels descend onto the cloud they were on. Good thing it was a large cloud they were on, with furniture on it as well. Come now, they wouldn't leave her alone on a massive cloud you can walk on without furniture or things to entertain herself with. The 4 angels landed in front of them. Hey guys, Izumi said with a smile, sitting up, you girls have fun? We did. The Spiral Angel replied with a smile, it's just so relaxing flying up here, she said as she did some stretches. A lot more relaxing than flying down there, Ribbit, the Frog Angel said, her face a vacant stare, making showing emotions for her difficult. It's a breath of fresh air, the Creative Angel added, it's so stuffy down there. I'm glad you like it, the Grand Angel said with a smile, her voice almost a song. This place is designed to be peaceful. So be free to relax here, she said before turning towards Izumi and the young angel. I hope you two were enjoying yourselves whilst we were gone? Izumi nodded yep. It's just so relaxing to lay here and just watch the sky. Well, that's good to hear, the Grand Angel said before she walked over to the young angel and crouched down beside her. And how about you? She asked with a bright smile. I'm fine, the young angel replied. Izumi's been taking care of me, and keeping me company. The Grand Angel smiled as she patted the young angel on the head. That's good to hear. I'm glad to see that you're comfortable up here. Loneliness can be suffocating at times, so I'm glad that you're keeping each other company. Oh, they're not the only ones keeping each other company here, a female voice said seductively behind Izumi, sending a shiver down the girl's spine as a pair of arms wrapped around her from behind, and a pair of soft things pressed against her back. Izumi let out a low whimper as she turned her head. Latching on behind her was a succubus with messy blonde hair tied into buns, yellow cat-like eyes, and enlarged canine teeth, like a vampire. There was also a pair of leather-like wings on her back. She was wearing a very revealing black leather leotard that just, and only just, covered her privates, black leather thigh-high, high-heel boots, and leather fingerless gloves. This was the succubus. A woman who was somehow allowed up here and liked to make Izumi flustered, very flustered. The Grand Angel signed, "Please don't go overboard this time. I don't want her to be a stuttering mess for half an hour again." The succubus pouted, "Oh, but I just love it when she's all flustered like that. She's just so cute with so red on her face." Izumi leaned away from the succubus, a light blush already on her face. Whilst she was okay having the succubus around, she would prefer it if she didn't get too touchy with her. Being surrounded by beautiful women was one thing, a thing she was still getting used to, but having a beautiful woman so uncomfortably close to her like this was another thing entirely. "Seriously, you're making her uncomfortable," the Grand Angel said with a frown. "Fine," the succubus said with a frown as she moved away from Izumi. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion, which caused Izumi to flinch slightly. Explosions meant one thing: a demon from her past was approaching. So it came to much surprise that, instead of an explosive demon showing up, another angel came out of nowhere and crashed onto the cloud. A trail of black smoke behind her. "Well, that was unexpected," the spiral angel remarked as the group looked at the new arrival with confused looks on their faces. The new angel pulled herself up, a manic grin on her face. "Yep, that worked well." The new angel said. "What are you doing, Ribbit?" the frog angel asked. "Making a jetpack," the new angel replied as she stood up. "But why though?" the creative angel asked. "You have wings, you can use them to fly." "Who needs wings when you've got a jetpack?" the new angel said with a manic smile. Okay, so she was not only new but also completely crazy. She was going to dub her the Inventor Angel. The Inventor Angel had salmon pink hair that was styled into dreadlocks, her eyes were wide and yellow with irises that looked like scope lenses. Her white wings were covered in soot, as was her white dress, which had burn marks on it as well. The Grand Angel shook her head, and I made this place to be calm and peaceful. Well, when you invite an angel who likes making things, which mostly blow up, calm gets thrown out of the window, the creative angel remarked. "Well, at least she's keeping her explosions away from the main area." "Where are you working, by the way?" the spiral angel asked. "On that cloud over there," the Inventor Angel replied, pointing towards a large cloud that had black smoke pluming out of it. "How was that even possible?" "Maybe you girls should go over there and check it out," Izumi said with a sweat drop before she accidentally sets the entire cloud formation on fire. "Yeah, I think we should," the frog angel said, sounding annoyed, "and here I was hoping to spend the rest of the evening snuggling, Ribbit." "Do you have to go?" the young angel asked. "You only just came back." "Apologies, but I do not want this place to accidentally burn down," the Grand Angel replied with a slight frown, before she smiled. "But do not worry, we will be back soon. I promise." "Yeah, sorry about that," the Inventor Angel said calmly, "but sometimes I just got to make stuff. And that stuff is setting the clouds on fire." The succubus said seriously, "Clouds on fire? How the hell do you do that? They're made of water, for crying out loud." "Let's inquire about that later, once we've dealt with the fire," the creative angel said, readying her wings to fly. "Don't worry, we'll be back soon, Ribbit," the frog angel said before the 5 angels and the succubus took flight towards the burning cloud, leaving Izumi and the young angel on the cloud. But they weren't bothered by it that much, they would be back soon. The burning cloud wasn't that far away anyway. As the angels and one succubus flew away, Izumi watched in awe as they flew. But she also looked at them with envy. They had no fear of heights, letting them fly without issue. But she was afraid of heights. She couldn't even look over the edge of the cloud she was on without freezing. The thought of tripping over the edge and falling endlessly terrified her. But she wasn't always afraid of heights. There was a time when she would have happily climbed a tall tree and looked down without fear in her heart, and she was determined to once again be able to have those memories again, to climb a large tree and not freeze up the moment she looked down. But what drove her the most was to one day be able to fly with her friends among the clouds. "Don't worry, we'll be flying with you guys soon," Izumi said with a smile as she watched them fly. The day of the sports festival started, as any day did, with Izumi wondering how she got here. Here being in the middle of a snuggle pile in Momo's bed, with several other girls snuggling up to her and her head smothered between both Momo and Nijire's breasts. Which wouldn't be a problem if she also didn't have one of Himiko's hands up her shirt, one of Tsu's lower arms down her shorts, Achiko once again hugging her like a koala, and dash, why the hell was Mei here and why did she have a hand grabbing her breast? At least Eri was behaving herself and just had her arms around her. So adorable. This was especially confusing for two reasons. 1. Mei was not here when they went to bed, and 2. She was sure she was at the edge of the snuggle pile with Momo in the middle. This was her room after all. She was supposed to be the one they were all snuggling up to. Well, everyone save for Eri, who wanted to snuggle up to Izumi, but that was a given. She refused to deny her younger sister snuggles. But still, how the hell did she end up in the middle of this again? And why the hell was Mei here? How did she even get here? She never showed an interest in joining the snuggle squad before, so why was she here now? Nijire had shown an interest earlier in the week and showed up from time to time, and snuggles with Eri were mandatory. But Mei, why did she join them? She would ask if she wasn't A, smothered between two pairs of soft breasts, and B, everyone else was asleep and she did not want to wake any of them up, not when it was 4 a.m. and everyone was comfy. So she just laid back and tried to go back to sleep, which was surprisingly easy when your head was sandwiched between two pairs of soft pillows and you had your younger sister. She still couldn't believe that Eri called her big sister, snuggling up to you. Seriously, there was no way she was waking Eri up. She was just too adorable. Anyway, when everyone else eventually woke up, Momo immediately apologized, as did Nijire, sort of. It didn't help that, unlike the others, Nijire was wearing blue lace undergarments, which Izumi did not realize until this morning. Achiko, once again, had to be removed with a crowbar. Tsu apologized for her lower arm wandering somewhere it shouldn't, Himiko didn't apologize for her arm going up Izumi's shirt, and Mei's explanation as to why she was with them was, because I can. Honestly, they were all going to need bigger beds at this point, because as it stands now, the only one who had a bed large enough for the entire snuggle squad was Momo. Anyway, today was the first day of the UA Sports Festival, with the first years competing. So, everyone got especially ready for the day, since this was the day that they would be making their debuts into the hero world. The week leading up to the sports festival went by quickly, it was mostly a blur. The schoolwork, training and general preparations went by quickly. She was surprised by how quickly time had passed. Her parents had settled down into their shared room, as did Eri, who over the past week seemed to be getting more and more comfortable. Guess being in a positive environment surrounded by people who would be willing to kill to protect her and castrate Overhaul with a rusty spoon, probably did her good. Inko had basically become the class mom, much to Izumi's embarrassment. Making sure everyone started the day well-fed and had a good dinner. Honestly, it was super embarrassing, but, then again, she should have seen this coming. She always wanted more than one child to look after and it showed. Hisashi was, however, struggling to get used to this. He, as well as Inko and Izumi, had expected to spend the week together, with Izumi staying at home for the week. But thanks to Inko accidentally pissing off a Yakuza clan, it wasn't exactly safe for them to stay at home. Izumi could tell that her dad was unhappy about these circumstances, but he wasn't going to complain about it. He wanted to keep his family safe. If this was the only way to do that, then so be it. The rest of the class got on well with her parents, everyone enjoyed Inko's cooking and found Hisashi to be a nice guy. Of course, getting Achiko to not bombard him with questions about what it was like to live on the moon was impossible. At least they didn't have that problem with Anesa, since he already had a relative up there and wasn't all that interested in space. Well, not to the degree as Achiko was. The sports festival itself was already set up. Izumi had watched them set up the UA arena a few times, as well as witnessed the JSDF arrive with a full battalion worth of soldiers and vehicles. She still wasn't comfortable having the army around, even if it was necessary considering who attacked them 2 weeks ago. But, at least there were a lot of heroes on site as well, including the entire top 10. She was going to spend the second day getting as many autographs as possible. Maybe even get one from the battle hero apostle, the liaison officer for the heroes and the army. On the military side of things, they had a lot of assault hounds around, with a few of them morphed into their hellhound configuration. A heavily armored bipedal walker with 2 independent flamethrowers. Of course, they brought a few other things with them as well, to help reassure the public. Including setting up a few stalls, as well as having members of the JSDF Senshidou team on site as well. No recruitment stations however, as that was a clear no-go. Nizu as well as the HPSC would have the JSDF's commander's arse if he tried to recruit people for the military during the UA Sports Festival. The UA Sentinels were also active as well, but they were far from the stadium, as the last thing the public needed to see right now was an army of robots. Izumi was vibrating with excitement as she and the rest of the first years made their way to the stadium. She had spent years watching the UA Sports Festival, and now, she was taking part in it. Plus there were so many heroes present running security. Of course, she recognized all of them, she had detailed entries on all of them in her notebooks after all. She was going to get so many autographs tomorrow. But not today, as she'll be busy participating in the sports festival. Her parents were rooting for her after all, and she did not want to disappoint. Sadly, only Hisashi will be in the stadium proper to support her. Due to Eri's mental abilities, they didn't want to just dump her into a stadium with several thousand people inside of it. That would be a recipe for disaster. So she'll be staying at the 1A dorm with Inko watching over her. "Hey, I recognize those markings," Hitoshi said as they passed by a stationary assault hound, looking a lot more awake than he did earlier there from the 3rd Mechanized. "That's my father's unit. He probably worked on those assault hounds at some point." "Huh, they're Mark IVs as well. Didn't realize the Brits were selling those overseas," he said before he looked around. "You know what version those assault hounds are?" Nito asked, sounding surprised. "Well, when your dad works for the JSDF you tend to learn a few things like that," Hitoshi replied, "and I was wrong, only a few of them are Mark IVs, the rest are Mark IIIs. "So, there's a chance that your father's here?" Izumi asked as their class entered the stadium and made their way towards their waiting room. "I'll probably check later," during the lunch break Hitoshi added with a nod. "It's not often I get to see him, so if he is here, I would like to talk to him." Izumi nodded. She knew all too well what it was like to have a parent who wasn't around much, so getting a chance to see and talk to them is great. Unbeknownst to the students of 1A, they were being watched. Sitting up above them on the edge of the stadium, a slim woman with pale skin was watching the students as they entered the stadium. The students of 1A especially. She was wearing a half-skull mask that covered her eyes, with a black hooded cloak covering a plain black shirt and trousers, and plain red sneakers on her feet. Her hair was black and messy, tied into long messy twin tails. Her lower face was visible and scarred, her lips were chapped and uneven and there were scratch marks over her neck. The woman smiled as she watched Class 1A enter the stadium. "So, Class 1A are participating today," she said with a smile, bringing up an apple to her mouth, her pinky finger held out. "Looks like I'll be paying them extra special attention," she said with a smile before she took a bite out of the apple. It took about an hour and a half for the stadium itself to fill up. Mostly civilians who wanted to watch the festival, but there were a large number of pro heroes there as well, looking for potential among the students taking part. Their focus would be mainly on the hero course students, but there were a few who were looking out of the students from the other courses, as there may be some untapped potential among them. But, the majority of them were focusing on the students of 1A, the ones who had already fought villains and survived an attack from Argonaut, which was quite impressive from a group of first years. The top 10 heroes especially would be keeping close eyes on 1A. It would have been unwise to have them all in one place, so they were seated around the entire stadium among the other heroes who were there. All Might himself was in the teacher's box in his withered form. There was no way he could maintain his hero form for the entire festival, so he was saving it until he needed it. Meanwhile, inside one of the tunnels that lead to the main field, 1A was waiting and getting ready for the festival, psyching themselves up in preparation and ready to give it their all. All of them were wearing their gym uniforms. Izumi, on the other hand, was starting to feel nervous. Yes, she always wanted to be here as a participant, but she was going out there with millions of people watching her, as well as a large number of pro heroes. She was worried about making an ass of herself. All Might told her to use this as an opportunity to tell the world that she was here, but she didn't know if she could do that, not at the moment. She was so focused on getting ready for the festival that she had completely forgotten that it was going to be televised. She also had the athlete's pledge to do, which really worried her. Yes, she had a speech prepared, but she was scared of making it. She had never done something like this before in front of so many people, and she was scared of messing it up. At least she'll have Durandal by her side for the speech. Sadly, he won't be able to help her during the events themselves, as he counts as support equipment, and hero course students weren't allowed to bring support equipment with them unless it was absolutely necessary to use their quirk. And Durandal was not necessary for her to use her quirk.
So, is everyone ready?
Ijiro asked loudly. I hope so, Denki said. We've worked hard for this after all.
Time to show off what we can do.
Just don't get ahead of yourself. Tenya said with his signature arm chop. Just because we are here doesn't mean we can afford to slack off.
We must give it our all today.
Well, good luck everyone, Hitoshi said with a rare smile. Let's try not to embarrass ourselves out there.
Yui added with a nod.
Well, as long as Momo doesn't shoot me in the groin again, we should be fine, Nito remarked with a smirk.
It was one time and I said I was sorry. Momo said.
And I will never forgive you for it, Nito said calmly. I just hope that no one mentions the USJ or that we've already faced villains today, Toru said. I don't want us getting more attention than we already have. The general education students don't like us already. I don't want them to hate us even more by drilling that point home. Most of the class nodded. Thanks to Izumi's friendship with Chiharu, they were able to get a quick rundown on how the rest of the school views them, and it wasn't good. Most of the first-year general education students hated them, seeing them as nothing more than glory hounds, not at all caring that half of them almost died during the attack, or that 13's death hit them all hard, especially Achiko, since she was her idol and her death devastated the Gravity Girl. It was a bit better with the second and third years, since they were a little bit more well-informed about what happened, and knew a bit more about some of those involved. But there were a few who still disliked them. Good thing her little speech didn't mention the USJ at all. But it did have a little message for anyone who was dumb enough to attack them again, just to be on the safe side. Don't worry, it shouldn't, Izumi said as she did some last-minute stretches.
Not that it matters. We're going to be the center of attention no matter what happens. Everyone from the other classes will be gunning for us. We're going to have to give it our all to stand out. Just because we survived a villain attack doesn't mean it's enough to prove our worth out there. We have to work hard, no slacking off. We'll have pro heroes from all over the country watching us, the top 10 among them. We have to impress them. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Denki said with a smile, with Ijiro adding so manly as the other members chipped in as well. This would be the first time anyone in Japan will see them in action, their first impression to the world. They had to make this count, as they wouldn't get a second one.
Izumi Achiko said as she put a hand on Izumi's shoulder, and accidentally used her quirk on her. Will you be alright out there?
She asked with a concerned look on her face. I should be, Izumi replied with a smile. I'll have you, Durandal, and the rest of the class out there looking out for each other. Achiko smiled. That's good to hear, she said before she deactivated her quirk and moved on to talk to Tsuyu and Dash.
I said call me Tsu, Ribbit. Sorry.
Achiko deactivated her quirk and moved on to talk to Tsu, and accidentally used her quirk on the frog girl as well. A few minutes later, President Mike began his introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, and all those wonderful colors in between. Welcome to the 68th UA Sports Festival.
The crowd cheered loudly. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
President Mike continued. We've got a jam-packed day for you. But first, please welcome my co-host, Eraserhead.
Why am I here? Eraserhead muttered, sitting beside the voice hero with a tired look. He did not like being here. He was an underground hero, for crying out loud. He doesn't do public events like this.
At least there was one small constellation for this. Someone very close to him, not physically, provided him with a large quantity of mango-flavored jelly packets, so Mike could live for at least a few more hours. As long as he remembered to announce both hero course classes at the same time, that is, otherwise present Mike will have to be renamed to past Mike.
Now, without further ado, let's introduce our first years. Present Mike announced loudly, coming out first. They're the heroes in training, making their first debut and ready to give it their all. Please welcome the first year hero course classes A and B. Huh, that's odd, Izumi remarked as the class walked out onto the field. With one B coming out of a different tunnel, they normally introduce the hero course classes individually. Maybe they don't want to show favoritism this time, Momo remarked. We already have enough attention on our class due to the USJ. No need to add any more. Izumi nodded. At least Toru got her wish. Up next.
They may not be heroes, but don't count them out just yet, for there may be hidden talent among them. Give it up for general education classes C, D, and E. Present Mike announced as the general education students made their way onto the field next. They are the ones with all the gear. Please welcome support classes F, G, and H. He continued as the support students entered the field, and finally. Don't count them out just yet, because there may be some unseen talent among them. Please welcome management course classes I, J, and K. As the last of the students made their way onto the field and formed up, Izumi had a look around the other classes. She could see Mei easily as she was fully decked out in her babies. She was never going to get used to calling them that. She could also see Chiharu as well, the blue-skinned girl, looking rather nervous. And then there were the few 1B students she knew, their class representatives Atsuka Kendo, hero named Battle Fist, and Jirota Shishida, hero named Gavaden. Itsuka was a girl with teal eyes and long orange hair tied into a high ponytail. Jirota, on the other hand, was a tall man with shaggy, brown hair covering most of his body. He had sharp teeth and his jaw stuck out a bit, with two of his lower canines poking upwards from between his lips. He was also wearing glasses. There was also Shoto. She hadn't talked to her since the remark about the training she made a few weeks ago in the cafeteria. In fact, from what she heard from Atsuka, Shoto doesn't talk that much in general. At least she knew her hero name, Freezerburn. And then there was Katsuki, looking as pissed off and ready to explode as he always did. He didn't look in one's direction, but she could already tell that he was already planning out how he was going to beat them. Like hell that was going to happen. I'm going to go out on a whim here and say that Katsuki is going to try and win this entire thing, right? Durandal asked, just quiet enough so that only Izumi could hear him.
Izumi nodded. Yeah, probably.
Well, best of luck to you, Durandal said. I won't be able to help you against him, not during this. Don't worry, I'll be fine, Izumi said just as Midnight, present in her scandalous as ever outfit, strutted onto the stage and cracked her whip, drawing everyone's attention. Oh gods, why is she the umpire this year? Midnight smirked as she watched the students react to her presence. All of them still very much remembered her sex ed class.
Ah, the joys of youth, she thought before saying, now that I have your undivided attention.
It is time for the student pledge. I present our first-year student representative, and our resident cute but deadly bunny, the unstoppable hero, Yusako.
Don't call me cute or a bunny.
Izumi thought in a panic, her face a bright red, especially when I don't have bunny ears or when Mirko was out there watching us.
I do not want her to single me out.
Unfortunately for Izumi, the rabbit hero Mirko had noticed her and had taken a very special interest in the girl. So, her name has the kanji for rabbit and tiger in it, and she calls herself unstoppable, she remarked with a feral grin. The name reminded her of that one time she broke into a fight ring and called herself Tiger Bunny. If she doesn't break a few heads out there, then I'm not interested, she said, unnerving a few heroes around her. Izumi nervously walked up onto the stage alongside Durandal and stood in front of the microphone, ignoring the harsh remarks from some of the general education students. She was not ready for this, and Midnight's earlier comment didn't help things one bit, plus now she had millions of eyes directed at her. Which was a lot more than the 20 or so pairs she was used to. She had her speech all ready to go, but she was scared to open her mouth. Durandal meanwhile had noticed the discomfort Izumi was having, so he did the only thing he knew of that could help calm her down. He got off the Durandal plush with his tail and dropped it into her arms. If there was one thing that calmed her down, it was the plush. This, predictably, worked. Holding her Durandal plush helped calm her down a lot, and make her completely forget that she was standing in front of millions of people just long enough to do her pledge as the representative for the first years. We pledge to do our best in this festival, to give it our all no matter what course we are in. We pledge to go plus ultra today and show the world that none of us is to be trifled with. And we pledge that if anyone is foolish enough to try and attack any of us, today or in the future, that all of us, general, support and business students included, will kick your arses to the moon. Mirko smirked. Yusako had her curiosity, but now she had her attention. As Izumi made her way back to her class, realization slowly crept up on her. The speech was fine, nothing wrong there. She would have liked to have called people out for holding the sports festival but didn't have the confidence to do so. That wasn't the thing that worried her, it was the other thing. I made that speech whilst hugging my Durandal plush. She panicked internally as she rejoined her class and passed her plush back to Durandal, worried that she had just become a meme. Spoiler, she had. Now then, it's time to announce the first event. Which is Dash. Midnight announced, raising her whip into the air as a roulette wheel on a large floating screen started to spin. A few moments later, it stopped obstacle course. All 11 classes will be participating in a 4-kilometer foot race. Now, you may use your quirks during the event, but not before it. I don't want to see any quirks being used between now and the start of the race. Whilst our biggest selling point is freedom of opportunity, we still have rules. Stay on the course, and don't gravely injure your fellow students, but anything else goes. And I can assure you, rule breakers will be punished personally. A shudder went down everyone's spine as they all made their way towards the starting line whilst Durandal went over to Midnight's side due to being unable to take part in the event. The R18 hero really didn't hold back. But, this time they had something to keep them occupied, the obstacle course. Of course, due to the distraction, the students all got mixed up, resulting in all of the first years getting mixed up and spread out around the start line, which was good as it meant that the individual classes weren't all bunched up and could provide help during the start. Not that it mattered in one's case. When Midnight announced the beginning of the race, Achiko pressed her fingers together, reactivating her quirk. Her accidentally using her quirk on her classmates was no accident, but a strategic choice to help the entire class. So, whilst everyone was cramped up trying to get through the doorway, the students of 1A floated safely over them. Especially when Shoto froze the ground, freezing almost everyone in place. Of course, this was a one-use thing. Once she's reactivated her quirk on someone, she could not reactivate it on them again, not without using her quirk on them again. Is that legal? Present Mike asked as 1A floated safely over the other students. Doesn't Galistram need to touch people to activate her quirk? She does, but she can also remotely reactivate it on something she's already used it on. Eraserhead replied she didn't use her quirk on her classmates between entering the field and the start of the course, so she didn't break any of the rules, he said, smirking behind his capture weapon. Clearly, 1A had planned ahead and were working together for this event. Which was good, as it showed foresight, planning, and teamwork. Very useful skills for their line of work. They might need to make another update to the rules after this. Once they were clear of the passageway, Achiko released her quirk, letting the students of 1A land and rush forwards, using whatever means they had to push forwards, either by quirks or brute force. They weren't the only ones who managed to get out of the tunnel, as a large mass of students were right on their tail, including the students of 1B. Ahead of them, naturally, were Shoto and Katsuki. Katsuki used his explosions to propel himself through the air, whilst Shoto was skating across ice she was generating whilst propelling herself forward by shooting fire out of her left arm. That's an interesting and diverse quirk she's got there. A combination of her mother and her father. She must be the masterpiece Endeavor bragged about during his fight with Paxton, the one that would one day beat All Might. Well, shit. No wonder she was strong. Well, at least she's no longer got her father breathing down her neck. As the group of students pushed forwards, the two leaders looked unreachable due to how far ahead they were. That was until they reached the second obstacle, the first one being the door. What the fuck? Katsuki shouted as he came to a stop before a large army of UA's tranting robots, including several zero-pointers. Well, that's fucking overkill. he remarked as everyone else around him came to a stop, and President Mike announced this as the Robo Inferno. Well, everyone save for the students of Class 1A stopped.
Izumi charged forwards, flanked by her 19 classmates.
One for all coursing through her. Thanks to her training, she could now handle around 6.5% of her power, more than enough to turn these robots into scrap metal.
And that wasn't even counting her classmates.
In the blink of an eye, over 30 robots had been destroyed, 3 of them being the massive zero-pointers.
One was taken down by Momo firing a cannon at it. Inesa and Nito worked together to bring down the second, and the third was brought down by, shockingly, Mei,
who had brought, alongside God knows how many of her babies, her Rorsch railgun. And was such a good shot with it that she was able to shoot off one of the zero-pointer's legs.
Yes!
Kana shouted with motherly pride from the teacher's box, raising her good arm into the air. You show them what you're made of, Mei. I'm so proud of her, Snipe added with a smile, glad to see their eldest daughter was showing off both her skills and her babies. The others were tearing their way through the robots as well, carving a path through the cheap knockoffs.
Would you look at that?
1A are just tearing straight through the Robo Inferno whilst everyone else is just standing there.
President Mike announced.
It's because they're not scared of them, Eraserhead said as he watched 1A pass through the Robo Inferno far faster than anyone else had in the past. If only they were my students, he thought. Not that Kana was a bad teacher, she was good at her job.
Nizu wouldn't have hired her if she wasn't. But some of them could have improved dramatically under his tutelage. Students like Izumi.
He shook his head before saying 1A have already seen what the real thing is capable of, as well as what awaits them in the real world.
These imitations do not scare them.
And the entirety of 1A just passed through the first obstacle. President Mike announced as the other students only just recovered from the shock of the large army of robots, and 1A smashing straight through them and charged forwards. 1B was hot on 1A's tail, as were a few students from the other courses.
But there was a large gap between them and 1A. And 1A is pushing forwards at a remarkable speed, with Freezer Burn and King Explosion hot on their tail. King Explosion? Izumi thought, realizing that was Katsuki's hero name, which was relatively tame in comparison.
She half expected there to be murder somewhere in that name, like King Explosion Murder. Probably good that it didn't have murder in it, since that's hardly a heroic thing to put into a hero name. And 1A's unstoppable charge continues. President Mike shouted, but will this next obstacle slow them down?
If they take a spill, they're out. If they want to pass this test, they'll have to get creative. It's the fall. Fall.
Izumi thought in a panic as she looked ahead. Her heart sank when she noticed a deep gorge ahead of her, as well as several stone pillars connected by rope. Why the fuck does UA have this?
Back in the teacher's box, Kana frowned. I'm sorry, Izumi.
I know you're still afraid of heights, but this is something you're going to have to overcome if you want to become a hero. Izumi started to hyperventilate as they approached the next obstacle.
Was this it? Was this where her sports festival debut ended?
There was no way she could get over that obstacle. The moment she looked down, it'll be over.
Izumi! Achiko shouted to her left. Izumi turned her head to see the gravity girl running alongside her. Achiko? Do you trust me? Achiko asked. Izumi's response was quick yes. Because why wouldn't she trust Achiko?
She was her friend, of course she trusted her. Then take my hand and close your eyes. Achiko shouted as she held out her hand. Izumi didn't hesitate, reaching out and taking her friend's hand whilst also closing her eyes. Achiko, determined to help her friend get across the gorge, pulled Izumi close and used her quirk and both of them. She waited for both of them to float up a bit before angling themselves towards the other side of the gorge, holding Izumi close with both arms as she did. Then, thanks to the telekinetic aspect of her quirk, she launched both of them across the gorge in a move she would later dub the Green Tea Cannon. It was a work in progress. They weren't the only ones working together to get across the gorge. Tsuyu and Fumikage were using their quirks to help their classmates get over as well, either using their tongue or shadow to carry them over. Inesa had picked up several students, about a fourth of the class, and generated a large whirlwind below him to shoot himself across the gorge. With another fourth using the whirlwind to shoot themselves across as well, thanks to Nito copying Achiko's quirk. And would you look at this? The students of 1A are helping each other to get across the gorge. Present Mike shouted. There's nothing in the rules that say helping each other isn't allowed, Eraserhead remarked. Even though they're working against each other during this tournament, it's not stopping them from helping each other. Teamwork is a vital part of being a hero. It can spell the difference between success and failure. 1A already knows the value of teamwork. Well, they're making great progress. Present Mike shouted, they've already cleared the second obstacle. Seriously, Lady Nagant, what are you teaching these kids? Absolutely nothing, Kana replied with a smile. Her students had come up with this all by themselves, and she couldn't be more proud of them. She was also extremely proud of Mei, who was using a mix of her hover saws and wire arrows to jump from pillar to pillar, hot on one's tail alongside Katsuki and Shoto. Upon reaching the other side, Achiko quickly reoriented herself and Izumi so that they could land safely on their feet. Okay, you can open your eyes now. Izumi slowly opened her eyes and looked around. Thank you, Achiko, she beamed when she realized she was on the other side of the gorge. You can thank me later. We still have the race to finish. Achiko said, flashing her a smile before running off, Izumi hot on her tail as the rest of the class landed and rushed forwards. And 1A's charge continues with no sign of stooping. This class is unstoppable. Present Mike shouted as 1A continued to push forwards unopposed. Well, Yusako did call herself the unstoppable hero. Eraserhead said she's made it clear that she won't let anything get in her way. No doubt that mindset has been adopted by the rest of her class. Now let's see if they can maintain it. Freezer Burn and King Explosion are hot on their tails but don't seem to be able to catch up. Present Mike continued. 1A is looking unstoppable. But will this next obstacle mark the end of their unstoppable push? Watch your step, or you'll be in for a nasty surprise. It's the minefield. Minefield. Several of 1A's students exclaimed as they approached the last obstacle, a minefield. How the fuck does UA have the budget for this? Denki asked loudly. Don't worry. We can get past this one as well, Izumi said, already coming up with a way for the entire class to pass this obstacle. All we need to do is dash, she said before the entire minefield exploded. Each mine detonated with 3 times the explosive force they were supposed to have. All 20 students of Class 1A were sent flying back onto the ground by the force of the explosions. It took them a few moments to recover, but only a few of them got back up quickly. A few took a bit longer, like Kyoka, who was covering her ears. What the hell was that? Minoru shouted as the dust around them started to settle. We didn't even enter the minefield yet. UA really needs to get its explosives checked out. Himiko cursed. This is the second time their explosives have blown up on me without being hit. What the hell is wrong with these things? Izumi meanwhile was wondering how the hell the entire minefield just detonated like that. None of them had stepped on a mine, they hadn't even entered the field, and the entire field exploded in one go. Even Present Mike and Eraserhead were confused by the sudden destruction of the entire field. It was just like back at the entrance exam, with the 3-pointers all having their missile racks explode on them. Back then she thought it was a mishap on UA's part, using faulty missiles. But when she later found out that only the 3-pointers at their testing ground had this issue, she got suspicious, but this confirms it. Someone has a quirk that allows them to remotely detonate explosive devices, and they were in UA. Which class they were in she did not know, but by the looks of it, whoever had done this did so to slow them down, and slow them down it did. 1A had come to a complete stop, allowing Katsuki and Shoto to pass them with ease. And Freezer Burn and King Explosion have passed by 1A and are neck and neck. Present Mike shouted. Crap! Hanta cursed as he and the rest of the class once again rushed forwards over the now clear minefield. Izumi herself quickly rushed to the front of the pack and pushed forwards without them, a feral snarl on her face. 1 for all strained to 7 present. It hurt when she moved, but there was no way she was letting Katsuki beat her, not after all the shit he'd put her through. No more would she play second fiddle to him. No more being just a simple stepping stone on his so-called path to greatness. She was going to show him that she was stronger now, not a useless Deku. She was going to beat him, here and now. Something clicked inside of her, like someone shifting the gear of a car to top gear. Her body suddenly shot forwards at inhuman speeds, like a bullet shot out of a gun. Breaking the sound barrier as she shot past Katsuki and Shoto, sending the two flying sideways. They were still in the air when Izumi crossed the line, coming to a stop just before the opposing wall, panting heavily. The feral glare was still on her face. Holy crab! This is unbelievable! Present Mike shouted in disbelief. With a shocking display of speed, Yusako shoots past Freezer Burn and King Explosion and takes first place. Lady Nagant! What are you feeding this girl? First place? Izumi thought as she started to calm down. She blinked a few times before turning around, noting that she had indeed crossed and overshot the finish line. But how? She didn't use one for all at 100 present, and yet, she moved forward so fast that she was barely able to process it. Her vision started to go blurry as her body started to feel weak. She could just barely see someone approaching her at high speed before she collapsed onto the ground and lost consciousness. When her eyes opened again, she found herself once more in a black void. Once more her body was covered in black mist, with only her left arm and the top half of her head visible. And she wasn't alone. Before her stood a man with short, salmon-spiky hair, with a large scar across the front of his face. Wearing a combat jacket with odd-looking gauntlets on his arms. Looking at her with judgmental red eyes. Izumi recognized the man. He was there in her vision of One for All's birth. The man who stood the furthest away from her. But why was he here all by himself? And why was he even here in the first place? He's dead. She got her answer a moment later when he opened his mouth and spoke of all the quirks you had to unlock first. It just had to have been mine. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 26. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.